Return and plead forgiveness, child. The Egan's will grant it.
Show me mercy.
You tricked me. My Helly.
Hello to all you amazing innies and outies out there, and welcome to my deep dive breakdown and review of Severance Season 2, Episode 9. We have made it to the penultimate episode where we see some characters leaving the town of Cure, and other characters that once lived the Cure life through and through have now crossed over into the light, potentially. We also have to say goodbye to some fan favorites, and I have some theories that may answer what exactly Cold Harbor is. With all that said, get your cooked eggs and your train tickets ready, because it's time for us to discuss this second to last episode of Severance. Spoilers ahead. We open with what I assume is Eleanor Hegan doing her morning routine, which sees her doing laps in an indoor pool. Now, after rewatching this scene a few times, I thought about something. Now, I recommend you all checking out my Cold Harbor theory video where I have more details, but long story short, I believe Cold Harbor is the final test for Gemma to face death by drowning. There's been so many clues and hints of water and drowning throughout this season. From the cartoon of Helly pineapple bobbing, to Helena at Woe's Hollow, to Gemma literally being questioned about drowning itself, and now we have this scene. Now, I'll be sharing more about this theory a little bit later in this breakdown, but I feel we just witnessed Helena practicing swimming and testing herself and holding her breath underwater, because I believe she will be a part of Cold Harbor. Now, outside, we see the vastness of the snow out in Cure PE as we see Helena preparing her morning breakfast with her father. Now, James is very much looking forward to this momentous day because they are under the belief that Cold Harbor File will be completed by Mark S. by the end of the day. Now, as we get a look around of this living room situation, I personally didn't find anything too out of the ordinary, but the breakfast that Helena is about to eat was definitely interesting, as he takes a sip of coffee while he watches his daughter eat her morning cooked eggs in a very particular way. Now, there's a couple things I want to point out about this scene. Now, first off, I believe that this is James Egan's home, and it seems like Helena lives there, or she could just be simply visiting. Now, next thing I want to talk about is this plate. I feel like the picture is depicting either two women fighting over a male, and the two women in this case could be looked at as Gemma and Helly or Helena. Or, as you also notice, one is wearing red and the other one's wearing blue, which could be representing an innie and an outie, and that being in reference to Helly and Helena fighting over both marks. Now, speaking to the eating of the egg and the splitting and the separating of the parts, to me, this could represent the idea behind a person being severed into multiple innies, like we saw with Gemma back in episode 7. Now, I also can't ignore the fact that she's eating an egg. Now, if you look up what eggs can symbolize, you find things like new life, or rebirth, or the representing of a new beginning, which to me gives us more clues about the whole pregnancy theory. And lastly, this whole breakfast situation is a callback to Season 1's conversation between Helena and Milchick discussing James Egan's favorite breakfast, hence why he said to her that he prefers that she eat it raw. Now, Helena mentions to her father that they'll be seeing Irvin a little bit later, which we'll be breaking down in this video, but I want to talk about them, their dynamic in this scene. Going back to the line delivery of him being almost unsatisfied with the way she eats her eggs and just the uncomfortability that's in the room and the vibe that we have here, I got this feeling that he's like dissatisfied with his daughter. And also I feel like Helena isn't a happy Egan. Like, I feel like she's unhappy. She's under this pressure of being an Egan. And to me, that just leads to me thinking that she's becoming an ally. Eventually she'll become an ally to our main characters at some point. Now, we watch as Helena is being driven by her driver from the home as the camera pans out and we see the entirety of the land, and we also have the shot of the water tower with the Lumen signal on it as she heads into Lumen for work. Now, this reveal just shows how close they are to Lumen, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some type of secret elevator or secret passage that can take James Egan from his house directly into Lumen, which actually might speak to the scene that we see between her father and Helly a little bit later in this episode. Now, cut to Ms. Wong, whose first name is Eustace, as today is the end of her Wintertide Fellowship. Now, we see that she's given the same prize as Harmony was given all those years ago, and like Harmony, her belongings will be moved from her parents' house into the Egan Empathy Center in Skalberg, which is north of Norway. Now, she will be working as a steward to the global reforms, and you can tell that she's disappointed because she was under the impression impression that she'll be finishing the quarter, but based on the tense relationship that we've seen between Milchick and Miss Wong, I would imagine that he may have sped up the process for her to leave sooner rather than expected. Now, before she continues her duties for the day, she's told that the handbook requires that they make bereavements with the material sacrifice, which happens to be the cure water ring toss game that we saw her playing with back in episode 1 of this season. Now, Milchick chose this for her as a proper totem to sacrifice, which we watch her smash the game multiple times as instructed by Mr. Milchick. Now, this rule or sacrifice being another example of the cure cultish ideology, but Milchick having chosen that game to me represents her destroying her past, but more importantly, her destroying the childish behavior and leaving it behind her as she enters into the next stage of her cure journey. Now, I think this scene of her killing her childhood could also serve as foreshadowing. Think about the game. It's a cure figure in the water. Now, think about what I mentioned earlier about Helena in the water for Cold Harbor. The smashing of an Egan in water could be something that Helena may experience if my theory comes to fruition. Oh, and by the way, remember the time when I said that Miss Wong was a robot being delivered into Milchick's office, or the time I said that she's a Gemma clone, or the child of Gemma and Mark? Yeah, those early days, weeks back, was a crazy time, right? She's just a normal human being. Well, normal and cure believers might be a stretch, but definitely no robot, that's for sure. Yeah, my Audi can sometimes say some really crazy things. Now, at the George's house, we see Gretchen tells Dylan the truth about her and his Annie kissing. Now, Dylan's in disbelief and confused by the whole situation, and honestly, I don't blame him, because again, I talked about this weeks ago, it is considered cheating, right? That you sleep, or I shouldn't say sleep, but when you have intimate moments with someone's Annie and you're in love with her outie, so I don't blame Dylan in this situation. Now, Gretchen admits that it had meaning, and she also proceeds with the classic playbook of what people normally say when they're called cheating, if we're calling this cheating, which I do, as she tells him that he's been adrift lately, and basically causing her to feeling alone and seeking love elsewhere, even though it's with him.
I don't know, maybe I just go quit. Maybe I go in and I quit and I just end his existence. How about that?
Now, I think we all knew this was coming eventually, but the mentioning of ending, could this moment be the beginning of their relationship coming to an end? Now, cut to Irving entering his house to find Bert inside his room, looking at the notes about Lumen employees, including the note about himself being a Lumen enforcer or a Lumen goon. Now, Irv tells Bert that he knows that this isn't true because he feels more comfortable around him now. He feels like he's a good guy, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Bert isn't a Lumen goon, at least to his word, as Bert invites him to take a ride with him. Now, Irv initially denies, but Bert convinces him to go with him. So it appears that sending Bert to Irving's was a part of what Helena was speaking of during the breath this, but based on what happens later, it seems as though Bert made an audible, or was this a part of Lumen's plans to getting rid of him under Bert's guidance? So maybe Bert convinced Lumen to let him handle the situation and not to hurt Irv or to send him somewhere bad. Maybe it's a compromise, or again, maybe it's all a part of a scheme to trick Irv in believing in Bert and going to this unknown place that we'll discuss later. Now, this shot that we get to see overlooking Lumen kind of reminded me of the earlier scene with Helena at breakfast, from the formation looking almost like a plate and even the egg itself being split into different portions. Now, inside we see the doctor with the bandage on his head after Gemma attacked him, as he's observing her and sees that Cold Harbor remains at 96%. Now, you'll notice that the shadow observers of the MDR department aren't at work yet. Now, that leads me to believe that those shadow MDR worker observers are innies, and they actually have outies that just haven't arrived at work yet. Now, the doctor calls Drummond to let him know about Mark's lack of progress, which leads Drummond to call him Milchick, and he tells him,
The final quota was promised today. Get him here now.
Now, we see Helly arriving to work on a mission and looking for Mark, as she's the first and only one in the MDR department. Now, speaking of Mark, he's in Devon's car and we see he's still recovering. Now, we see that Mark still has that lingering cough, which I definitely think will have some type of callback in the finale, as we get one of the funniest jokes, if not the funniest joke or moment in this episode, when she's mentioning the hole in Mark's head whistling, as we see that they are preparing or following through with her plans to using the Lumen birthing cabinets as a way to communicate with Mark's innie for answers. But first, we see them making a stop to meeting their new ally, which is Harmony Cobell. Meanwhile, we see Mark sees and ignores the call coming in from Milchick. Now, back with Helly, we see her bursting into Milchick's office, questioning Mark's absence for the second day in a row. We see Milchick refuses to answer if he's aware of what's going on with Mark and says that Dylan will play as the role of the department chief, which leads to Helly taking a dig at him by mentioning him being the replacement of Cobell, which we know he clearly doesn't like. As we get a classic Helly move by her referring to herself as Helly E, which Milchick says,
Helena Egan is my employer. You are my subordinate, and this behavior constitutes insubordination.
Yeah, no shit.
Now we see that Gretchen did not listen to her husband. Instead, she is seeing his other side, and she tells Dylan what happened in the morning. Now, unfortunately, Gretchen tells him the news that this complicated situation has to come to an end with Dylan threatening to quit his job. Now, we watch as Dylan G begs and pleads with her to not end this because she helped him with seeing this other side of what life has to offer for his innie. As they say, desperate times call for desperate measures, as Dylan G gets on one knee and proposes to her and promises to give her a new and better life. But again, it's complicated as she apologizes and leaves. Man, I'm not gonna lie, I feel bad for my man Dylan G. After losing his close friend in Irv and now this, we see Dylan G is broken and lost. Now Dylan G shares what happened with Helly, who encourages him to keep the ring he made for Gretchen and to give it to someone else that he might meet on the severed floor, but Dylan reminds her that there aren't too many prospects down there. Again, we watch Helly trying to uplift him, and she uses the message left by Irv as like a way to motivate him, but instead he is in a mood. He is not happy right now. He reminds her that it's actually her fault that they're down here and that their innies don't know anything other than work, and he also talks about how the Audis aren't that different from their innies because they couldn't tell the difference between her and Helena. Man, I wish these two can just realize that they have a lot more in common than they think, right? They're both in very complicated relationships and going through a similar situation with dealing with married people. But again, I understand that they're both kind of lost. And also, like I said earlier, they're both broken at this point. Now back at the secret meeting, we see Cobell arrives and her and Mark are reunited for the first time since she almost hit him and ran him down with her car. Now Mark sarcastically reminds her just how good things have been going lately, right? As we know that he just learned about his wife Gemma, who he thought to be dead, is now in prison by the company he works for. And oh yeah, he also had brain surgery in his own basement. Now Harmony tells them they're gonna have to wait till nighttime to go through with Devon's plans, but she also mentions that it's a good chance that Mark hasn't completed the file, and she's referring to Cold Harbor.
Don't even know if he's completed the file yet. I assume no.
What file?
Cold Harbor.
Well, what?
She's already dead.
Now, after she just said what she said about Gemma and mentioning death and she's no longer here, my theory about Cold Harbor being the ultimate test about death seems to be coming true. Now, of course, Mark wasn't a fan of Cobell mentioning Gemma dying and wants to leave, but Cobell advises him to call Milchick to keep appearances up, but we see Mark refuses because, rightfully so, he can't trust anything that she says. Now, Devon convinces Mark to listen to her and do this for Gemma. Now, I want to address something. With them having to go to the birthing cabinet to speak to his innie, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like he's not fully reintegrated. Because if he was fully reintegrated, they would be able to speak to both Audi and innie Mark if he was. And we know that Ragabi left early and she wasn't completely done with the process. So again, I am to believe that the whole reintegration process hasn't fully been completed with Mark quite yet. Which means that we most likely will see Ragabi in next week's finale to complete the job. Now back at Lumen, we see Helly gets the map to the elevator as Dylan comes to a decision about what his future is going to look like with Lumen. As we see Dylan filling out the innie resignation request as he checks off all the boxes to his reasons why. Now we know that Milchick and Dylan have their own history together as he shares his thoughts on Dylan's decision, but that doesn't stop Dylan from filling out his paperwork and ultimately turning in his key card as we see Ms. Wong tells him sorry for not doing a better job in her role, but Dylan tells her that it's not her fault. It was nice for her to say that to him because again, my man is just heartbroken right now. Now Mr. Drummond and Milchick have a discussion about the recent events of Dylan's decision, but more importantly, Mark S. recent absence as Lumen awaits their most finest day. Now we watch Drummond blames all of this on Milchick as Seth uses a very big word to describe his actions, and Drummond didn't like that word and he wants Seth to apologize for using it. Now we watch as Milchick apologizes, but Drummond has him rephrase it multiple different times. It was almost like they were in a break room and having this being like a form of punishment. Now we watch as Milchick says his last apology as he tells Drummond,
Devour feculence. It means eat shit, Mr. Drummond.
I love this scene so much. We're going to talk about that here in a second, but Milchick reminds him of his job description, which one, he's owed a measure of respect even from his superiors, and secondly, he manages and oversees the innies while they're on the 7th floor, and the outies, like Mark for example, are Drummond's responsibility. Look, if you've seen my theory videos over the last 9 weeks, you've experienced my feelings on Milchick and how much of a roller coaster it's been. But with that said, I love this moment for him and seeing him push back against Drummond, which in many ways is him pushing back against Lumen for what I imagine is the first time that he's ever done that. Later on, we see him having another moment in which it seems that he's getting closer and closer to breaking the spell that Lumen has over him. Thinking back to season 1 and even parts of this season, Milchick at times can be truly terrifying, but I like that we get to see more of the person and not just the employee this season. I have really enjoyed this character, and again, I love that moment. Now Mark takes heed of Cobell's advice and calls Milchick as we see Mark initially makes up a story about him going to a doctor because of his nosebleeds, but Milchick suggests that he give him his location to help him because he's a priority employee and he should be under Lumen's care. Now kind of feeling under the pressure of the situation, we see Mark admits that he's not sick and just needed a day for himself and didn't need to share anything else with Mr. Milchick. Now we see Mark strikes a chord with Milchick when he reminds him of the very popular belief of Kier by telling him,
Isn't that what Lumen's all about? Balance? I mean, work is just work, right?
Do you know what I mean, Mr. Milchick?
Work is just work, but in some cases, like a Mr. Milchick working at Lumen and being a believer in Cure, work is more like life for them. But after experiencing everything with the paintings and everything with his review and obviously what happened in this episode, Milchick's feeling conflicted about Lumen, and he has a moment here where he looks at the iceberg painting on the wall. Now, the iceberg to me could be used to symbolize how something is hidden beneath the surface with Milchick and his lack of feeling contentment with Lumen and how he's underappreciated and feels unseen. You'll notice that he's almost teary-eyed as he ends the phone call with Mark, who promises and gives him his word that he will be returning to work soon. I just love how one of the big themes about this season, and obviously this has been a big theme with the show, but the inner person, right? The inner side of you, listen to your inside, and obviously that being a metaphor for the innies and outies, but I just love that we get to see the inside of a Milchick, of a Miss Wong, of a Cobell, and obviously the rest of our characters. It's been a really great theme that I've enjoyed this season. Now back with Bert and Irving, we see them in his car and Bert tells him that he never hurt anyone and all he did was drive people places without asking what happened to them once they arrived at the destination, which confirms that he did indeed have a history with working for Lumen, not just as an innie, but also as an outie. Alright, let's talk about this moment here. Now, obviously it seems that Bert is helping Irv in a situation, and we'll talk about their goodbye later, but I have a question for you all. Do you right now trust Bert? Is he being honest? Did he not hurt anyone? Does he know more about the alleged dropping off people at these mysterious places? Where were these places? Who were these people? Were they test subjects? Were they past Lumen employees? Like, what is the truth, Bert? I feel like he's hiding something. I feel like there's still something there. As of right now, let me know in the comments, do you trust Burt. Now, Burt and Irvin arrive to a new location of the show, and that is Kier PE's train station. Burt gives him a one-way ticket for Irv to go to the furthest place possible and tells him that he can never come back to Kier. Now, Irv points out that Lumen will most likely be coming after him, but Irv shares with him again his true intentions behind being severed and calling back to the dinner table scene of him wanting a part of him to be innocent again. Now, he talks about the love that his Annie shared for Irv, who never has been loved before as himself, but his Annie has, and he wants to know what that feels like. As Irv wants to experience his Annie's love for Burt outside because, as he says, he's ready, which he repeats over and over again. This moment was very touching. Like, I love these two, number one, as actors, and if you know them, they're friends outside of the show, which just makes it even more of a heartfelt moment. But again, we see Burt tells him that they can't, and he repeats that over and over again as well. As we watch Burt and Irv, for now, say their goodbyes. Now again, I am in the belief that Burt is being genuine. He wants to protect Irv, but I still have this feeling that he compromised. He made a deal with Lumen, but I don't understand how Lumen would be okay with an ex-employee of 9 years in Irving just being free with the knowledge that he's gathered on the company. This plot definitely still has a lot of mystery wrapped around it. For example, why is Irv okay with leaving everything back at home? And what motivated him to seeking answers about the elevator? And again, what happened with Burt dropping off these people in these mysterious locations? Now it's come to the end of the day. As we're back at Lumen, we see Dylan awaits the elevator, which he eventually gets on as Dylan G for the last time. Now, I love the intercut here because we're saying almost goodbye to these characters in a way, right? Because at the same time, we see Ms. Wong getting picked up for her next stop within Lumen's journey, as we see Irv, who again has no clothes, no belongings. He's on the train with Radar as he's about to head on to this unknown location. So the question is, will this be the end of Audi Irv, Dylan's Innie, and Ms. Wong for this season? And if this was against Lumen's orders for Burt, what will happen to him for being disobedient? Also, as a dog lover, I'm just glad that Radar is good. He's safe. That's the most important thing to me. But again, I just love the emotion from this episode as it sets up the finale. I feel like there's a good chance that this will be the end of these particular characters, at least for this season, and we're going to pick up with their story come next season. Now, this is cut between the severed sound and slowly going down the export halls as we see someone has arrived from the testing floor onto the severed floor. As we end this episode with seeing Mark getting in the back of Hampton's truck to hide before heading to the berthing cabins. Meanwhile, we see Helly still in the MDR department studying the map as a person who got off the elevator arrives and is no other than James Egan, who tells her,
"You tricked me. Why, Helly? What the fuck?"
Now, him saying that he was tricked, to me, speaks to him addressing what happened the night of the gala. Now, the question is, could him being here indicate that he's going to take Helly down to the testing floor, which goes to this shot that we've seen many times in the opening credits? Or, calling back to what I said up top of this breakdown, could Jane be using Helly to get to Mark to complete Cold Harbor File? Again, I believe Cold Harbor will test the limits of the severed chip and put Gemma and Helly, or Gemma's innies versus Helly or Helena, to the test of death and see who comes out back to life after drowning. Remember, Helena practicing swimming and testing herself, her breathing techniques, and eating a light breakfast. I believe it's all in preparation for her to endure and suffering of what Cold Harbor has in store, and it will involve Helly, Helena, and Gemma, and Mark's going to have to choose between the women. Hence all little clues within the opening credits. Now, back at the berthing cabins, Cobell convinces a security guard to let them pass to Cottage 5 with Devon because she's one of James. Now, for a second, I'm not going to lie, I was thinking that Gretchen was going to be the security guard, and she still might be, and we might see her in the finale. But anyway, this could be a situation where they're using code words to describe the special individuals that get the severance treatment like we saw with the senator and his wife in season 1. Or it also sounds like this is a recurrence. What does she mean when she said one of James? Could that mean that he gets women pregnant and possibly this is some type of system that's put in place to take care of them and no one knows about this situation? Again, following suit to the show's cult-like behaviors where you hear the stories all the time of how certain cult leaders have multiple wives and they get women pregnant all the time and them thinking that they're doing this and serving a greater purpose. Now, Cobell mentions a Miss Marsha White on the 9th floor, which is under the specialties department. As we get more code words being used, as she says she's looking for a gold symbol, which most likely means code for activating the Severance chip for the women to switch from their outies into their innies at an entry point, which is what we see happens to Mark S., who enters the cabin. Now, Mark S. is clearly frightened and confused as Devon convinces him that he's okay, he should stay, as Devon walks him upstairs. This almost mirrors the last season penultimate episode where we saw Mark met Devon for the first time. Clearly, this is under different circumstances. As he walks upstairs to a room where Cobell awaits him, and this is their first time seeing each other since the finale of last season, as we end the episode with this.
Do you remember the last thing that you said to me?
She's alive.
Again, this was a very interesting way to call back to the final moments where all these particular characters last saw each other, but what I'm about to say now is not coming from my innie, but coming from my outie. Now I know they're here for answers. What's going on with Gemma? Why was she taken? What's Cold Harbor? Etc. But there's a part of me that felt that Devon and Cobell were in on tricking Mark, but again, that's just the other side of me speaking. Now, the Mimi, or the Innie me, believes this is all in service of helping both Innie and Outie Mark, and Cobell will spill the beans on the truth, or at least some of it, because I still think that she's holding some cards close to her chest. Now, overall, look, obviously, if you look at the last penultimate episode versus this one, I felt that last season's had a little bit more going for it, like there was more of a build-up. The tension was at an all-time high. But with that said, I still feel like this was a good setup in a very different way to a much different and potentially darker outcome that can come in next week's finale. But look, I still really enjoyed this filler episode a lot. Kidding about the filler part, but if you know, you know. So again, I'm torn on if we'll be seeing the continuation of where Irv is going. Was this the last time we see Miss Wong? Did we say goodbye to Annie Dillon for good? Those plots may have some screen time, but I mostly think that they're going to be addressed in season 3. Which means I think that we're going to be spending most of next week's episode with Mark and Cobell and Devon and James and Helena Egan and of course Gemma and Helly. Now I'm feeling pretty confident about my Cold Harbor theory coming true next week, and we're going to have to watch as Mark is going to have to choose between his wife Gemma and his new girlfriend Helly. Now, based on the footage we've yet to see in the trailers, we know that Mark does come back to Lumen as promised to Milchek, and we see things will get physical between him and Drummond based on this shot here. So there you have it. Congratulations, you all have made it to the end of this week's breakdown. Now, I know we're coming down to an end. Next week is the finale, which is crazy, but I will be saying this more next week, but I want to make sure you all know that I am super appreciative of all the support you all have given, and I just really appreciate it when you all stick around to the very end. So, as always, if you're still here, put in the comments right now, #She'sAlive. Now to my favorite part of making these videos, and that's reading what you all thought about the episode. Now, if you all aren't aware, every Monday I share a Severance video where I respond and react to you all's great theories. So by all means, share your major plot points, your deeper meanings, what you all hope to see in the finale in the comments section below. Now, if you all enjoyed my breakdown, do me a favor, hit that like button, man. Let's try to get this to over, let's say 1,500 likes. And also do me a favor, share this video, hit the share button, share this to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about Severance just as much as we do. And of course, if this is your first time here, welcome to the channel. Hope you all had a good time. Consider sticking around by checking out my other videos, especially my Severance videos. And if you like what you see, consider subscribing to the channel today. Now, if you all want to take the support even further, you all can join the channel memberships, which can be found in the description of this very video. Now, don't forget, you all are awesome, stay safe, and I'll see you all for the finale next week. But in the meantime, if someone gets in your face like Drummond did to Milchek, remember to tell them this.
Devour feculence. It means eat shit.